Leaders are supposed to cast a vision. If you need to get the credit for everything, don't become a leader. That's not what this is about. What this is about is you paving a way for people to become their best. The adage of good leaders are quiet when you make mistakes and loud when you are able to succeed. That kind of mentality as a leader goes a long way. I'll say it this way. For a time, you can motivate people through pressure, through manipulation, and through fear, but it doesn't last. It doesn't make people want to stay. So I want to find out as a staffing leader, how can I invest in your future? How can I make you want to be here?
Hi, I'm Kortney Harmon, Director of Industry Relations at Crelate. This is the Full Desk Experience's Industry Spotlight Series.
Welcome back to another episode of the Full Desk Experience, the podcast that brings you insights from the front lines of the staffing and recruiting industry. I'm your host, Kortney Harmon, and today I'm super excited. We have a truly exceptional guest joining us. Adrian is the CEO of ROLINC. Did I say that right, Adrian?
You got it. That's it.
Okay. Staffing, and he is a part of this Colorado Staffing Association, and the knowledge that he has in our industry. He's here to share his unique journey, his valuable insights from the roots of the manufacturing to leading a niche staffing firm. Adrian's story is one of the most innovative, adaptive, truly passionate stories that I've ever heard. So we're going to explore how he's navigated through the challenges, whether it's from the industry or in general, building a thriving company culture and the position of his organization as a leader in skilled trade and manufacturing staffing. So whether you're a seasoned professional or executive, an upcoming leader, this episode is going to be packed with strategies that you can apply to your firm. So let's dive in without further ado. Adrian, thank you so much for joining me. Tell our listeners, I know more about your story just because we've talked a few times and it is truly one of my favorites. Tell our listeners a little bit more about you, how you got into the industry, and maybe a little bit more about ROLINC and what you do for this.
Absolutely. First off, Kortney, thanks for having me on. And I love the introduction. I'm just wondering if maybe I could hire you to introduce me at every single event. That was great. That was spot on. But as a matter of fact, I'm like, who is this Adrian guy? I want to meet this guy, whoever that is. He sounds amazing. Couldn't be me. Anyways, it's great to be with you. I think maybe what I should do is probably start off with because you mentioned the name of our company. It's like ROLINC. Did I say that right? So maybe I could at least start with that. I didn't found the company. The company was founded when I was 12, and I considered myself to be a smart 12-year-old, but I wasn't that smart. So Bob Bidwell founded our company, and when it was started, it was actually started as an online resume database company, kind of like a monster career builder. But you got to keep in mind, online in 1992, 1993 is very different than online in 2024, as we all know. And, if you don't believe that, go back and watch You've Got Mail with Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan, and you'll be blown away at the whole instant chatting thing and how exciting that was back then. So that said, it was really started as that. And one day, one of his clients just said, "Hey, Bob, can you help me find somebody?" And he did. And he said, "Man, I really like this." And then the client says, "How much do I owe you?" Then he's like, "Wait, you'll pay me to find people? I think I like this a lot more than what I was doing before." So that is how we became, it was Resumes are Online, OL Incorporated, Resumes Online Incorporated, ROLINC. So that's where the name came. And of course, since then we've pivoted and grown different niches. And about 18-ish months ago, we went from being ROLINC Staffing to now we're ROLINC Staffing and Search, because we have a search division as well. So yeah. And then as far as how I got into this, I don't think I've ever met anyone in staffing that was like, when I was 5 years old playing on the playground, and imagining things, I was like, I can't wait to grow up and be a staffing person. Like that doesn't even enter someone's mind, right? Most people, their testimony is something like this: I didn't know it was there. I fell into it. I needed a job, blah, blah, blah. That's kind of similar with me. I was moving from Nashville, Tennessee area where Staffing World is going to be this year. And I had been working for a manufacturing consulting / technology company. And what I'd been involved in very heavily was the automotive industry and working with quality control departments and engineering departments. And so I cut my teeth in the manufacturing world in a job that I also really had no training and background. I'm not an engineer. I'm not that. That's a long story in and of itself. I was a missionary in South America, needed to get my wife healthy again, moved to Nashville. This guy says, "You want to try this?" I'm like, I'm not qualified. He says, "It doesn't matter. I can train you." And that's how that happened. And so I did that for a couple of years, fell in love with manufacturing, really did. Became kind of a manufacturing statistical geek. I geek out on that stuff, really enjoy it. And in 2009, my family and I moved here, and with the purpose of actually getting involved in a ministry, starting a church and some other things. And I needed a job. And Bob Bidwell was like, "Hey, I heard you're moving to Denver. Have you thought about staffing?" I'm like, "What is staffing?" And he started talking, and I was like, "Wait a minute, are you picking people up in a van and dropping them off at work? Because if that's what it is, I don't know if I want to do that." And of course, his reaction was your reaction. He laughed, and the more he talked about it, I thought, that sounds like something that I'm kind of into. I mean, even as a pastor, like, I like connecting people and helping them, and so it was like, okay, I think I could do that. And this was 2009, though. I started in August. I just celebrated 15 years a couple weeks ago. Started in August, and it was 2009. And so, of course, that's during the recession. So I remember about a month and a half into it, I came home one night, and long day. I remember that. Someone had to eventually tell me, "You can't stay till 7 for the rest of your career. You'll burn out," that kind of thing. So they pushed me out of the office, and I go home, and my wife's like, "Well, what do you think?" She's like, "You could just tell." I was like, in my head. And I was like, well, either I made the biggest mistake of my life by joining the staffing industry during a recession, or there's nowhere to go but up from here. And thankfully it was the latter, not the former. And so within about a year and a half or so, our skilled trades division became the largest producing division. And then, one opportunity after another came along. And in 2021, I was very fortunate, very blessed to have had Bob as my mentor. Was able to purchase a company from Bob, and that whole story is a miracle story as well. We had planned a 7-year plan, did it in about 4 years, and so here we are trying to figure it all out and continue to grow.
I love it. I love your story. It's truly one of my favorites. And I've had that discussion with many people. So I love it. Thank you for sharing that. Talk to me. Let's talk brass tacks. Let's talk tactics, because that's our listeners, our operations leaders, executive leaders, learning how to do what you did and scale and grow and do better in tough times and what that looks like. So obviously, from someone who transitioned from manufacturing into the staffing industry, what unique perspectives do you bring to our industry? And obviously, you said you're kind of a nerd in that aspect. I love stats and things. Talk to me about how you were able to scale that division as one of the most successful at ROLINC in such a short period of time.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. Number one, as an outsider, and this might be why I tend to generally, when it comes to filling internal positions, I tend to lean towards people that don't even have staffing experience. And I think it's because that was my experience. I'm not saying that's the only way to do it, or that there are no good people who have previous experience that should be hired. It's not like that. But I didn't have the "we've always done it this way" mentality. I didn't have any preconceived ideas of what success would look like. For me, I think a lot of it goes back to having a fresh perspective, looking at it from the end user standpoint. So, like, if you're used to talking to, Bill in quality, you're used to talking to Janet and the head of engineering or whatever it might be. Well, when you're doing that on a daily basis, you kind of know what their struggles are. You know where they get stuck. And so when I entered into this, I really didn't even know how to think from the recruiter's perspective. I had to learn that, actually. What was more natural for me was the opposite. I'm thinking of like, okay, but if I say this or if I do it this way, that would never square with them, because they're not going to come at it that way. They're coming from a completely different perspective, being in the discipline that they're in. So I think that was kind of helpful for me. I think that was an extremely positive experience, because I wasn't there. I had no preconceived ideas. It was more about providing something I knew that they needed in a way that would make sense to them, because I had been there. And I had been very, very, I mean, like, I kind of feel like I'm not, when people ask me about my strength, kind of feel like Forrest Gump sitting on a park bench, like, and there I was, like it's just, I look back on it and I got to meet like one of the heads of manufacturing. I ever forget the title, but for Hyundai, I got to meet with people from, I mean, high ups in the manufacturing side from Honda, from Nissan, because in Tennessee, Nashville, you've got Toyota plants, 3 of them in Kentucky up there, and you got the motorcycle plant in Ohio for Honda. Then you got the Honda minivan plant in Alabama and Hyundai in Alabama. So I really was able to just get immersed in that world, and that even though I didn't know recruiting staffing, it really was a help. I think that's one thing. The other thing is, and I just posted about this on LinkedIn today. I was talking to a young man last week, and he goes, I just feel stuck, and I don't know what my problem is, and I want to take this step, but I can't. Blah blah blah. And I won't go into his whole story, but I said, look, man, I said the moment you wake up and you decide to elevate yourself out of the bed, you are taking risks. Like, life is about taking risks. And so now there's some risks that you'll learn some valuable lessons from, and you'll go, oh, I'll never do that again. But I think that is also something that I would say to any business owner: be willing to allow your people to try things. Now, if you know something is a complete dumpster fire and it's not going to be good for them, I'm not saying, yeah, jump into that. But there's some things that you have to go, I haven't done that before, but let's give that a shot. And I think having leaders here that allowed me to be able to do that, that was huge. Being able to, they had never really done like a national account for a manufacturer. And so within about 9 to 12 months, somewhere in there, I forget exactly how long, I landed one, and it was like, okay, we're going to need you in Hagerstown, Maryland. We're going to need your help in Boston, Massachusetts, and we're going to need your help. And of course, there's some complexity to that, right? And they went out of their way to do everything they could to allow me to spread my wings and to manage that. And this is before the age of Zoom and all that. I mean, there was WebEx and all that, but that just wasn't something that people were using. And so it was, hey, I got to fly over here to meet this person and go. They were very supportive. And I would say, the coming at it from the perspective of the end user, number one, and being willing to take risks. Those are 2 of the main things from a 30,000 foot view that really stick out in my mind.
I love that. And you're right. Even from training thousands of people, it's like, well, we've always done it this way. So I love that you were able to come at that differently, to be like, well, how can we be creative in our industry and industries across staffing and recruiting? We're having to do things differently, whether it's because of AI, whether it's because of processes, the candidate experience is different, how we're working with clients. We're having to shift. The fundamentals are still the same. The foundations are still the same, but we're having to shift. So I love that. And I love that you give your teams the autonomy and the flexibility to do that. How's manufacturing overall doing? And B, how are you identifying and capitalizing on skills trade in manufacturing in that niche now and when you first joined? Like, how is that different? What are you doing differently? What are you finding success in? Because in today's economy, let's face it, things are a little rough.
Yes, absolutely. So a couple things. I had looked about 2 months ago, and I wish I'd had the data for you right now. I don't remember the exact like where manufacturing is at as far as the index goes. But I will say overall, the last, 15-ish plus months, it's not been beautiful. It's been a little bit of a struggle. And so, manufacturing overall nationally is down, but there are certain pockets within manufacturing that are actually doing very well. I think one of the big things that we have seen in the last 18 months or so is because, again, 15 years ago, throw up an ad on Craigslist and wait for all the, former engineers to say, hey, I haven't done machining in a couple of years. I did it in college. Give me another chance. I'll do it. I'll take it for $18 an hour. Like that's where that was at then compared to where we're at today. Very, very different world. I think one of the biggest things I would encourage staffing companies to consider is, okay, so if you are, let's say it's manufacturing or construction for that matter, actually we do skilled trades in that field as well. If you are going to be a representative of that industry, then in so many words, put your money where your mouth is and be willing to be heavily involved and represented and show up and volunteer at trade associations. Be willing to say, hey, what are the training and vocational programs that we could actually be involved in? Like, where could we volunteer? Where do you guys need help? This is the biggest thing I've gotten from. Matter of fact, I'm thinking right now about a local county vocational program. One of the biggest questions they have is, okay, we love talking to staffing companies. And the reason we love talking to staffing companies is because you guys are on the front line. So we don't always get all the answers we want from the private sector like we'd like to, but you guys are right there. So can you help us out? Like, where's the gap between here's what our program offers and what your clients are actually hiring for right now? Like, what are they hiring for? What are the skills that they need? I think being willing to invest in that is a huge part of whether or not your company is going to be successful going forward. You mentioned something a second ago. The fundamentals are the same, and the fundamentals are the same. The foundation is the same. It's connecting with people. That is, no matter what goes on, no matter what technology is introduced, it is about people and connecting with them. So how do we do that? To use the term you used earlier, to scale our company and to meet the needs of the market. Well, rather than just posting and praying and yes, advertising and all the other stuff that we're doing, where can we be involved at the grassroots level? Not only is that a matter of goodwill, not only does that speak to what we say we actually believe in, which is the right thing to do, but also you're going to be at the table with the individuals that are forming these training programs. You're going to be at the table with, again, I mean, you're networking, you're bridging the gap between education and quasi government programs and things like that, grant funded programs and private sector, and you're there rather than being on the outside looking in. You're at the table making these connections happen. And so we've seen I think a lot of benefit from that. And it doesn't matter what trade you're in. If you're not manufacturing, let's say it's construction. I'm just going to throw out a name, and this is not necessarily a commercial or anything like that for them. But if you're in construction and you're not, considering looking at the local chapter of the Association of General Contractors, in your area, then you're going to be missing out. And it's not just like, let me sign up and get my name in there. Like, that doesn't do anything. There are so many companies that do that. It's okay. We want to learn what are the issues. We want to be at the table. We want to volunteer. We want to support. There's a scholarship fund that we've been contributing to for years, and whether we get all the notoriety or not, right up front, that's not the most important thing. It's like for us to be able to say, hey, we believe in your industry and we want to support it. That goes a long way. So I would say that those are the things. And of course, Kortney, there's all kinds of tangents you can go off from here, from the marketing and business development side of things, but just from a out of the box-ish kind of perspective, something that I think means a lot to the end users that you want to talk to. I believe that that's a huge part of our success in the last 18 months or so.
I love that. I love just getting to think differently. And being, we all have this discussion, meet them where they are, but we say that, and then we say, well, we don't have time to actually go. We'll just, we'll donate, we'll do stuff. But I love the idea of your concept is just show up. So I love that. I'm going to talk to leaders in staffing and recruiting. You have kind of grown from division manager to CEO. What leadership lessons can you share with other staffing and recruiting executives that maybe were in your shoes before that want to be you when they grow up?
I mean, I know it's a term that is used, and you read it in books and hear it in podcasts and things like that. But I would challenge anyone that is in leadership or wants to be in leadership. Look back at your career, look back at your life, and look at the people that made you want to get out of bed in the morning, the people that inspired you to be better, and what do they have in common? And one of the common threads is, again, it's a term we use a lot, but they were servant leaders. They were individuals that understood that being a leader doesn't make it all about me. Being a leader is supposed to make it about my team, and by elevating them, I elevate our brand. And someone asked me kind of in a backdoor situation through a DM on LinkedIn. They said, why do you post about your team as often as you do? And I said, look, it's not, the reason I do it is because I want people to know that it's the people on the front lines that make the magic happen. Leaders are supposed to cast a vision. They don't need to, if you need to get the credit for everything, don't become a leader. Like, that's not what this is about. What this is about is you paving a way for people to become their best. And I think that's something that I've intellectually, that I think you should know that intellectually from spending time in industry and reading books and just being out there and seeing what people are talking about. Okay, this is what this leader says, but then you see it come to life when you're living it out. The adage of good leaders are quiet when you make mistakes and loud when you are able to succeed. Like, I think that kind of mentality as a leader goes a long way. Look, I'll say it this way. For a time, you can motivate people through pressure, through manipulation, and through fear, but it doesn't last. It doesn't make people want to stay. So I want to find out, as a staffing leader, okay, how can I invest in your future? How can I make you want to be here? And I would say that kind of goes into another answer, which is don't buy into shortcuts, because usually shortcuts aren't. And I think I was sharing with you before we get on, my wife is a fitness and nutrition instructor, and she's got certified through, I forget, NASM, and for a company called Les Mills. Anyway, she's doing all this stuff, and I can't tell you how many times people are like, okay, but how can I do this quickly? She's like, well, you can't. And you can just see like the look on their face, like, well, I've tried this and I've tried this. She's like, you can keep trying all these different things, but really it's like, what is going to lead to sustainable success over time? And those are the things that they're short gains with your people. You don't always see. I'll give you one example. I believe that it's critical for staffing executives and leaders to understand the world that we're in now. You mentioned this earlier. It's changed. You have to be willing to invest time, resources, manpower, get your team behind the idea of, hey, we need to we're not just recruiters. We're not just staffing specialists. We're brand ambassadors. And that isn't something that happens on accident. That's an intentional thing that takes place in the company, from the leaders down to everybody else. And so I think those are the things that you don't see, like, okay, I posted this, I was on this podcast, I did this or that, and therefore we have 10 more clients. Like, it doesn't work that way. But there are huge gains that we have seen. It's just not instant. So I would say trying to, as a leader, be a servant leader, understand that's the right mindset. Secondly, not taking shortcuts, and trying to, I think lastly, the thing that really comes to mind is consistent, teaching your people and living by example, that it's consistent action over time that gets the results. Those are things that really stick out in my mind. And then one last thing, Kortney. It's not just, okay, I've had this conversation with a lot of leaders. I invest in this person, and then like 2 years later, they're gone. Like, what was that all about? I'm like, yeah, but what did they do for you in 2 years? Well, they were a great employee. Okay. Well, then what do we miss? What am I missing here? Like, yes, in a dream, in a perfect world, everyone stays forever, but that's not reality. That wasn't your course. It's not my course, right? So being able to provide a place where people can become their best, and you letting them know from day one, that's what I want for you. I am going to push you. I'm going to challenge you. But it's because accountability to me is not, I'm lording over you, as much as accountability. What it means to me is me caring enough about your future to keep you to what you said you wanted to accomplish. That's what I'm here to do. So those are some things that come to mind as a leader in this industry.
In the light of our economic shifts, what we've seen, what has ROLINC primary focus been for 2024? You hear the conversations: is sales the emphasis? Is candidate retention the emphasis? Perhaps, business strategy and process planning. And that's my number one question. And part two to that is, how has that focus evolved in response to the current market conditions today?
That's great. Okay, so the answer is do all of it. Do all of it now. I think I will say it kind of goes back to the whole shortcut thing I mentioned a second ago. I don't know that there's any silver bullet. I think it's everything kind of working in tandem. There are a few things that I can probably highlight, though, that kind of stick out in my mind. This isn't necessarily the exact answer, but I'm going to lead in with this. I think you as a leader have to keep a positive mindset in challenging times, because if you freak out, that trickles down to everybody else, and that doesn't do you any favors. So I think keeping a positive mindset and understanding, like, I've had people go, I've never seen it like this before. I've never seen it this bad. I was here for the last, recession, but it was never like this. And there's different things going on right now. You've got companies that traditionally were relying wholeheartedly on staffing and recruiting partners, and now they're going, we beefed up our own internal recruiting department. But at the same time, it's like any other time in a weird market, there's still opportunity. So how do we tap into that? Going back to one of the things I mentioned earlier, it has to be done with intention, but you have to develop some kind of approach to a marketing strategy. You cannot just wish that you can get out there and be in front of people, or just post memes. I only know one person that posts GIFs and memes and gets away with it at the level that he does, is Steve Gibson. He's outstanding at that. He's okay. If you're not him, don't do that for all of your career, right? But for the rest of us, I'm sure there's a strategy behind everything he's doing. But for the rest of us, there really does need to be some kind of strategy and planning and actual thought put into this. Like, okay, what is our brand? What is our why? What are our values? How do we reciprocate that in everything that we're talking about? What are we planning on having any kind of approach to a weekly, some kind of consistent or monthly? What are we doing weekly? What are we doing monthly? How many touch points do we have on a weekly basis? These are the things that I think are critical. And for someone that goes, let's just be honest, the staffing industry is not known for being cutting edge. It isn't. All right. We have a hard time adjusting. We have a hard time adapting. And it's, hey, we're, going to get my Rolodex out and start calling, yeah, that's important. Calling's also important, but how am I going to, in a day and age, we are accustomed to seeing things over and over, images and video content. How am I going to be a part of that? Also, let's also address this. We have all been Amazoned. All of us have. We've all been, whether you realize it or not, like, I can't believe that, like, as of less than 2 years ago, my daughters are like, Dad, why don't you just DoorDash? I'm like, what kind of Star Trek crap is that? Like, what do you mean DoorDash? And so now it's like, that's a part of my everyday life. Oh, DoorDash it, Well, what do we've been DoorDash. We've been Amazoned. We are accustomed to clicking buttons and stuff happening. And so I think that finding a way to remove the traditional friction or challenges, obstacles that our clients are used to, in getting what they need from us. How many channels of communication do you have with your clients? In regards to I mentioned this earlier, the networking side of things, that was a big part of 2024. We went into it this year going, okay, last year we got punched in the gut pretty bad. We weren't expecting that. We all thought, like, oh man, 22 was awesome. We're going to carry that through. And it just didn't really roll in like we thought it would. And so we said, you know what we need to do? We're looking at the market going, you know what people are craving? Human connection. And so where are we missing out on? Where can we show up? Where can we Where can we invest? And so I would say having an actual marketing strategy, like a real, kind of like Pinocchio, maybe a real boy, like be a real company and have a marketing strategy. Because again, in staffing, it's kind of like, well, we know what we're doing. Like we get orders and we fill them. Yeah, that nothing wrong with that. But to have sustainable growth in the market that we're in and beyond this, it's going to take an online presence that maybe you haven't had before, maybe even considered before. And of course, not just online, but where we networked, where are people? I mean, this year alone, when I look at who our new clients are, vast majority of that's been driven by those two things. Yes, we still believe in picking up the phone and calling. Not against it. I don't think you ever get away from it. I think the old fashioned and tried and true picking up the phone, cold calling, I think it's great. That's how I grew my business in part back. When I started here, I didn't know any better. That's all I did. So I'm not against that. But I think if you're relying exclusively on traditional means and you're not going, okay, post pandemic, you went like basically 2 years without conferences. You went 2 years without all these events. What are people wanting? What are people craving? Well, and the more technology that's used, not against it at all. I think we need to find out how to implement it better in staffing and recruiting. But the more tech that there is, the more buttons there are, the more people go, yeah, but is it human? And they want people, right? So I think coming into this year, that was a big part, was how do we establish a real marketing strategy? And I'll just do a little plug here for Kelly from Thoughtful Resound. If she listens to this, I got to throw that in there. She's helped us out quite a bit. And where are we missing out on opportunities in human connection as relates to networking? And I'm not just saying like join your chamber. I mean, that's great if you want to do that, but I mean, look at the places, not just in our industry, like not just from an incestuous standpoint, but trade associations and places in the community where we can legitimately show up, network with them. Those two things have been extremely critical. They have allowed us to, frankly, with less people, we have a considerable amount less people this year than last year, and yet we are accomplishing more. And so that's a really and we did not go out and do massive layoffs or anything like that. It's just through attrition and things like that, and going, okay, what do we need right now? And I would say that the marketing strategy and having a real life approach to trade association and networking, that's been huge for our businesses here.
I love that. And I haven't just heard that from you for manufacturing. That is a big conversation across the board right now. So I love that. You did talk about technology and, is it AI? Is it a human? I like to refer it as, we look at technology as it's the easy button. Like it's the fast way. It's the fast track. So how do you guys in your office determine and balance the idea from technology adoption with human touch in recruiting? Because you seem to have the human touch is where things happen. And I'm a firm believer of that, because sometimes technology can be noise. So how do you balance those two things, technology adoption and human touch in recruiting?
I think that goes back to client experience and candidate experience. Okay, there are things that our clients really don't care how it's getting done, as long as it's getting, like, there are things that they don't even know we're doing. And if we can automate some of that and we can take some steps out, great. But there are some things that they don't want to get an automated email for. There are some things that they really genuinely need to know. Adrian's behind this, Alexis is behind this, Josh is behind this, Minnie's behind. They need to see that if they are experiencing anything that leads them to think that we are, for lack of a better term, I call it auto-sourcing instead of outsourcing, but auto-sourcing something that really should be a little bit more closely managed with human touch, then I think that would be where you cross the line. That's how I see that personally. It all goes back to them. It's really not about me. It's not about, even frankly, when it comes to the experience, it's how can I make their life better? How can I make my candidates' lives better? And usually where the magic happens, I believe, is what can I take out of my recruiter's hands that will allow them to do their job better so they can connect with more people? Because what does that do? That makes them happy. That makes my client happy because they're getting the results. Usually that makes the job seeker happy as well because the process is happening quicker. I was just on the Smart Idea Summit with Haley, and I think I just blanked on her name. I feel terrible about this. The COO for Haley Marketing mentioned, and it's something I've heard from a number of people over there, and it kind of sticks out in my mind. Speed is the new currency. So, and again, that's, we've been Amazon, we've been DoorDash. How do I get quality? And I think the old saying is like, you can have cheap, quality, and quick, but you can't have all three at once. Try to get, 2 out of 3 or whatever. But I think our clients will, and this actually does touch on something else in the market I should mention as well. But I think if they can see that they're getting quality and they're getting it quickly, and we're using technology to make that happen, everyone's happy as long as they still feel they can connect and engage with us. The other thing I was going to mention, Kortney, is there's a huge, huge trend right now because the market is challenging to just go, okay, well, so, Staffing Corp down the road. What was the name of that company in Office Space? Whatever that is. That's all that comes to mind. Staffing Corp. Yeah. So down the road, they're going to offer me this service at, I don't know, 35% or whatever it might be, this market. My answer and our answer generally, not because we're staffing snobs, not because, that's beneath us, but because we know what our value is okay. Hey, best wishes. We do wish you the best. We will be here if we can be here for you in the future. And I would say like 75% plus, of companies that have tried that, they found out like it's not what we thought. And so I think one of the things I would encourage staffing companies to do is don't do the knee-jerk reaction, because it's very common in this market. Is okay, they're cheaper, I'll be cheaper too. Usually my first question whenever I approach a client, they go, well, Staffing Corp can do it 35, and I'll ask them, well, how's that going? Are you getting what you need? Because if you are, a nice way, why are we talking right now? So yeah, anyway, sorry, that was on my mind. Just had to get that out there.
I love it. No, I love that. And that's a great, we oftentimes just think of our value as our price, and that's not the value. Also, when you have the consultative relationship, your value is tenfold. And it depends how you're interacting with your candidates and clients. So I love that. You mentioned trends. So I'm going to pick your brain. Speaker at the House for Colorado Staffing Association. What industry-wide challenges, and when I say industry-wide, I'm thinking staffing and recruiting in general, are you currently seeing, addressing, having me conversations with the Colorado Staffing Association?
Yep. So some of them are unique to Colorado. And I'll get those out of the way up front. The last few sessions, maybe not so much this last one, but the prior 2 or 3 before it, we've had some big ins come our way. So I'm talking about legislatively, excuse me. On the legislative side, that's been a huge focus of our association because there have been changes that affect, and if you're outside of Colorado, I'm not going to give you a bunch of names of things, but basically programs that wherein you are there's paid sick leave for staffing temp employees. Let me say this. I want to say this and make sure I'm very clear. It is not, when I mention these things, it's not that we don't want people to have these things. We clearly do. It's just, how do we do it in a way that's sustainable to industry? And so what happened in Colorado is it kind of pitted hiring managers and employers against staffing companies, because we came at them saying, hey, we have to pass this cost through like we do with federal income tax and federal unemployment and state unemployment. And some of them really were like, yeah, we get it, but not all of them. And so there's that friction that came into play. So I think when that's one of the particular programs, there's several other things, but when that happened, I think a lot of companies in our industry here in Colorado were like, whoa, we better start paying attention to what's going on legislatively. And there was another big thing that happened with in the medical industry with primarily with like CNA type care and things like that, but not exclusively. And it has affected our industry to the point where I've seen a couple of companies in the medical space kind of just go away. They're just saying, we don't want to do this anymore. So what happened is it kind of woke everybody up. And we realized, hey, we can't expect people who've never been in our industry to understand what we do. Good night. Like I try to tell people that I've known for years what I do. Like I have people in my church, like, what is it that you do? Like, and I tell him that. He's like, oh, okay. All right. So you pick people up in a van and take them to work. I'm like, no, I don't do that. And so that if they don't understand, the legislators aren't going to understand either if we don't show up. So, that was a big focus for CSA this year. We had our first, like, hey, let's meet at the Capitol. And, we shook hands and set up meetings and coffee dates with our legislators and try to explain, here's what we actually do. We're not the boogeyman. We're not here to hurt. We're here to connect. We're here to make it better. So that's one. I think that's a challenge. And I don't think that's going to be exclusively Colorado. There's other states that are battling similar situations. Then I think I would say outside of that, there's just one of the things I just mentioned, which is just let's see how far down the if you in a tough market like this, if you try to win your battle by going down on price, there's always going to be someone lower than you. So you have to find out what value can you bring. And let's face it, you can't bring top value to every client. Some clients, you're just not going to be a match for them. Some of them will never perceive the value, and that's usually a partner you don't want to work with. I look at it this way. I've been, next summer will be 25 years, been married, and pray for my wife. She's a good woman. Pray for her, please. But I come home with ideas. It's like, no more ideas. Stop with the ideas. But in that 25 years, like I can tell you, this is not how it started. It did not start with me getting down on one knee and her going, well, the ring I got last week was bigger. Like that's not how that would have worked. That wouldn't have worked well, right? And I could have flipped around and done it in my direction. So that's not how you build a partnership. So I would say in this market, and this is really hard to hear for some of my colleagues, be willing to let go of companies that are not really in a partnership with you. It's okay. And I know it sounds just like, no, we have to hold on to it. This is bad. Things are bad. It's tight right now. We have to hold on. And it's like, look, you could take that same amount of time and receive a tenfold benefit, not just for yourself, but for the company you're serving. If you're willing to let them go and understand there are companies who really do want real partnerships. And so I think, the challenges we're facing are legislative. They are, the typical things that happen in a downturn economy. Can you go cheaper? Can you go lower? And I think, of course, and I mentioned this earlier too, there's the reality that a lot of companies have built their internal recruiting departments up from where they were 3, 4, 5 years ago. Some of them in significant fashion. And the tendency is for us to go, well, they're doing their thing, and so good, whatever. Our approach is, hey, look, at some point, there's going to be a time when you guys are collectively scratching your heads going, we can't figure this role out or these roles out. And, in the meantime, I'm going to drop some coffee off. We're going to chat. We're going to talk. We're going to stay connected, because at some point, and I can tell you just this last week, there's a client I'm thinking of who shall remain unnamed, who said, hey, it's been a while. It's been like 15 months or so. But in that 15 months, I've sat down and taken this person to, a great Cuban place here locally. Cuban food is amazing, by the way. We've talked and we had coffee and hey, what are your issues? And even if they were not ones that were, how can I take an order from you? It was, hey, what are you struggling with? Even if it's like, hey, well, I had one client that said, well, we really can't use anyone right now. No, I'm not reaching out for that. Like, what are you struggling with? Well, I've got to provide an analysis, and my CEO is telling me we can't pay more for this role. But I'm trying to tell them, I said, how about this? How about instead of you taking anecdotal stuff from Indeed and this and that, how about you let me send you, and I'll redact the names of the companies and all that stuff, but I'll send you real data. So you can show within the industry here's the pay rates that are being offered for this role. Take that, use it, let me know how it goes. And sure enough, they got, well, those are the relationships that you're building. You're building trust. And whenever they will need help at some point, whether that's a year down the road or 5 years down the road, just staying in touch with them goes a long way. And being willing to provide something and not expect something right away. I think that's one of the keys in this market. Stay connected, continue to branch out, you can't sit down and go, they're going to come back someday. They're going to come back. It's like, it's like all the 80s and 90s movies for the nerdy kid waiting for the prom date to show up. Like, we can't be that person, right? We have to be actively going out. At the same time, I don't think there's any harm in a company where it was a really good partnership, but their hands are tied. They've been told they can't use you. Man, communicate with them, find out where they're struggling, and meet those needs. Even though you may not reap the results right now, they will come. They will come.
You mentioned something, and I like thinking through this. I'm thinking in my mind, short-term placements, long-term clients. So how do you balance the short-term placement goal with your long-term client and candidate relationships? Because there's two different lines of sight there.
Correct. 100%. I think, again, and this is the challenge for not just the industry, this is the challenge for human beings. There's an ancient proverb that says a false balance is an abomination, right? So like when something is out of skew and I set the scales myself and I go, okay, if I just do this, then I can get this outcome that I want. Well, there again, I said earlier, there's no silver bullet. I think it's really just a mix, and it truly is a matter of, I've got to keep my frontline recruiters mindful that, hey, we need to focus on the things that we can fill now. Speed is a new currency. Continue to network, on a consistent basis, even when you don't have the order, because the order is coming, and you want to be the first one to provide the people. There's that aspect with, okay, I'm also talking to my account managers. I'm talking to my branch managers if you're in staffing. I'm making sure that I'm empowering them. I'm giving them a budget. I'm giving them the resources necessary. I'm encouraging them to go and, hey, take it 2 visits a week and find someone that maybe they don't have a job order with you right now. Maybe they can't even give you one right now, but stay in touch with them. Do something to stay in touch with them. Send them some cookies. Hey, can I get you lunch? I know you've been really stressed out with this project. It's open enrollment. You haven't slept for 4 days. Can I buy you lunch? Be human, right? So the answer is, not to sound vague, but it's both. You cannot not fill the quick stuff. That has to be done, but you also can't ignore what's going to come to fruition in 18 months. I think both of them being met right now is possible. It's just a matter of keeping both a priority.
I love that. So looking future-wise, like what role do you see staffing and recruiting firms playing and addressing, let's talk specifically skill gap industries like manufacturing and construction? What do you see those staffing firms playing in the future?
Well, a couple things to consider. We are, and this is not like Adrian's opinion. I've been reading up on this quite a bit lately. We don't have, as a society, we don't have as many children as we used to, say 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. And we're living longer. So there's more services that are being needed for more people. This is just general number stuff, right? There's more services that are being needed to be rendered to more people, and there's not enough people to do it. So it's not even just a skills gap. It's literally like a birth rate gap is what I heard one of the professionals recently speak on. And let me just say, I'm not saying this to encourage everybody to go out and have lots of children right now. That's not my point. I'm just telling you the reality is, here are the numbers. All right. And so because of that, and because of, again, the skills gap, I think that we are going to be, in the long run, and who knows what next year has in store. Everyone's got their prognosticator caps on, but I think in the long run, our industry is poised for growth. I really do. But I also believe the way that we understood it to be and the way that it was even just 2 years ago, 24 months, 36 months ago, will not be the same. I don't think it's just going to be people calling you with a plethora of job orders. I think everything has changed socially. You're talking about our culture shift with new generation of work coming into the workforce. There's a higher demand. Like I don't know about you, but I have like I remember going to McDonald's as a kid, and I'm dating myself here, okay, in the '80s, and like having birthday parties there. Like McDonald's was high class, man, right? And so now, and you go to a lot of restaurants, and trash is overflowing, like bathrooms are dirty, and it's like what's going on? I'll tell you what's going on. There's not enough. These businesses can't operate at the same level with the same amount of staff as they used to and be profitable. So they're trying to maneuver through all that. You go, well, how does that have anything to do with our industry? Well, what you're seeing out there is what we're seeing in here, just in different ways. So I think that one of the things that we have to do is, in regards to going back to the skills gap, be cognizant of the fact that yes, they're going to need more of our assistance, but going back to some of those mentioned earlier, if we're not at the table, if we're not speaking to that, if we're not invested in that, it's not that we won't still be around, but we won't be leading. If you want to lead in the industry, I think that's super critical. I do think our industry will be in high demand, but again, going back to what I said, I don't think it will be as we understand it as the norm, maybe 3 years ago, right, or 4 or 5 years ago. I think it's going to be so much more about brand representation and showing up and being a real value added partner versus hey, I do staffing, I can get you people, work with me. And it's not going to be the same market, but I don't see that our industry goes away or that the need for staffing goes away. It will be different, but not, I mean, again, there's no way for me to rationalize the idea that there's less people for more work and yet the industry is going to go away. I do think companies that are unwilling to adapt and unwilling to put together, marketing strategy and put together a way of finding themselves connected and online more frequently, more consistently. The companies are unwilling to think, okay, how can I adapt to my client's needs right now versus 3 years ago? If you're not willing to adapt, yeah, you'll struggle. But the need for the industry is not going to go away. And the more regulatory compliance that is put on employers as a whole, and it just seems like with every passing year we're seeing more of it. I think they're going to need, and that's why the Europe's staffing force, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is actually a higher percentage of usage in Europe than it is in the United States because of the regulatory compliance. So the more that you see that here, and I don't see that shifting the other direction in the next 20 years, I think the more demand there's going to be for our services as well.
I have two more questions and then I'll let you go. I want you to take a look internally. So we just talked externally about clients who we're working with, but look at your own internal staff. What key performance indicators do you find the most valuable in measuring the success of your staffing firm? We oftentimes get on this KPI hamster wheel, like how many calls are you making? What are you doing? How do you measure that? What performance indicators do you find most impactful for your team?
Well, I'll give you a couple thoughts here. One is one that it's been more subjective, but it's about to be very objective for us internally. It has to do with some data that we just haven't done a good job of capturing. But there's a correlation with time to fill. So I think that the ultimate metric at the end of the day is who's producing and what are the gross margin dollars, like that bottom line, right? That really, though, it's not enough for you just to look at that and go, wow, that's awesome. The real question is why. And just like, the Simon Sinek book that, it starts with why. If you peel the onion and go back, like, okay, why is that person so successful? What's the common thread between this staffing specialist and this search recruiter? Why are they, winning this quarter when so much of the industry is down? Like, what did they do different? And I would say that, Yes, there's some things that really I think are not going to change. Yeah, you could look at the number of phone calls. That's always important, but let's also look at, okay, if we're going to go down that road, let's be honest. I know some people internally, they don't make as many calls, but they sure know how to connect with people online. So like, okay, are we measuring that? Are we measuring accurately time to fill? Because again, if speed is the new currency, the best recruiters are not going to be the ones that are, you know, taking the longest to get the orders filled. Clearly, I would also say, and this is want to be mindful of how I present this. There's a lot online, and I be real careful how I present this about working in toxic environments where the boss is like, you got to be here at 7, and you can't leave till 7, and nobody wants to be in an environment like that. However, I would also say the people that come to mind that have been the most successful, they find the way to get the most out of their day. I think 8 hours is a long freaking time to be doing anything. So if you're going to be doing something for 8 hours, man, get the most out of it. So one of the things that I have found, one of the metrics, and it's kind of an unseen metric, or maybe an unmeasured metric by many companies, is okay. Well, like walk me through your day. Let's walk through it. And when you do that, I think one of the things that really should be looked at is how distracted are we allowing our people to be? Now, I'm not saying you can't have your phone. That's actually not the moral of the story here. Please don't read it that way. It's how many tasks are we giving them in one day? And this is where the automation comes in. This is where being able to look at, okay, what do I want them? Where are they going to be successful? They're not going to be successful by data entry is not going to be what wins them the staffing game. But that has traditionally been a part of it, right? Okay. Sending confirmation messages for people's appointments, that's not going to win them. I mean, do they need to do that? Does that need to be done? Yes. So what can I get off their plate? And that's a metric that maybe, we're always looking at how many phone calls and how many emails and how many. Why don't we as leaders look at how many tasks am I giving them to do that aren't related to them producing anything at the end of the day? Like, yeah, it has to be done, but where are they going to shine? I didn't hire a recruiter for data entry. Like, that's not what I hired them for. Yet that has traditionally been, and I think that's one of the things that it's a weird way maybe of looking at metrics, but it's maybe more of our own metrics as leaders. Like, what am I giving? How many tasks am I expecting them to fill? That I can modify, that I can change, that I can automate and make their lives better and see higher production, higher yield. But traditionally, phone calls, emails. I think not so traditionally. How many connects are you making on LinkedIn? For some of our staff, we sat down with and go, okay, everyone's unique here. I've got some people that much rather just hunt on the phone. Okay. I have some people that say, I've seen more success with what I'm looking for through this route. Okay, then we'll measure that. We'll see. But at least we're going to measure it. That way we know. Versus I just feel that this is better for me. Okay, great. Well, we'll measure that, and we'll see how we all feel about that when we measure it. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
No, it does. I love that people don't always have to have phone time. Like when COVID hit and I was coaching, one of the most impactful things that people were getting new business with was sending a LinkedIn video message because it was on their phone. The app was on their phone to these hiring managers. And I mean, I'm hearing people today say, did you know you could send a LinkedIn video? I'm like, yep, I've been talking about that for about 4 years now. I'm glad you're a part of the game. Yes, all your people should be doing that. And you're right, not everybody functions that way. So I love that they have the diversity to do so. I'm not a number of connections. I want to know your connection time. In my career, I've had a lot of people that are like calling the Santa Claus hotline or the White House to boost their time on the phone,
Yeah.
but their connections aren't impactful. So I love this. This is one of my favorite questions. But I love that you said, how many tasks are we giving them? It's not just like, what can we take off our plate? That's where AI and it's It comes down to our process and what we're encouraging our people to do and what we expect of our people. So that's a good self-reflection of us as leaders. Last question. And I know you don't have a crystal ball, so please understand that. I'm fully aware. Looking ahead, everybody wants to know ahead. What do you think, Adrian? What major opportunities, disruptions do you foresee the staffing industry have, and how can we prepare? I know you don't have the crystal ball, but
Yep.
give me your thoughts.
Yeah. What are we, 30 some days away from election day? So there's that. Uh, yeah, and I think there's so much that people put into that. I don't know that that's by itself. It's impactful. I'm not saying it's not, but that's what everybody's thinking about right now. I think, I would say that there. I mean, there are obviously crises that we overseas and things like that do have an issue. They do have an impact on supply chain. They do have an impact on how we're able to get out our GDP and things like that. We don't control all this. So what I try to do, this is kind of where Adrian lives, is okay, what do I control? Because yeah, I can vote, but I don't control the outcome of the election, and I can pray for peace in the world, but I'm not at the table making those decisions. All these things that I just don't directly control. So as far as the staffing industry goes, I do think in the long run, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's a actually positive outlook with some outliers. I think that the companies that are willing to adapt, like I said earlier, I think there's so much opportunity for our industry as a whole. Where I see some challenges, I believe that we really do need to do a better job as an industry. And I know ASA does a great job with this, but just as local business owners, we've gotten so accustomed to, oh, someone else is taking care of this. I really do think and this is where the work that CSA has done is so important here locally. I do think keeping an eye on and being connected with people that are making decisions legislatively, that's kind of an important thing. And if you're not involved in that, you really should be, because you can't complain about something that you're not invested in. When my kids are like, "Oh, I didn't want to eat this," I'm like, "Really? You didn't want to eat this? Did you want to eat some dirt? Go get some dirt outside." Like you didn't buy it. Mom made that food for you. That kind of thing. So you're not invested in that. As it relates to the legislative side, that's very important. I also believe that in regards to the technology that's being implemented, technology is being not just discovered, but implemented, innovated on the manufacturing side specifically. A couple of years ago, there was a lot of conversation about what's going to happen with 3D printing. There's been some application for that on the manufacturing side that's really revolutionized certain things. But plastic injection molding, everyone thought that would, maybe kick plastic injection. It's still here. It's still a huge part of the medical device manufacturing industry. So I believe there are areas where technologically you're going to see some shifts. And as a result, that's going to change how people hire. But I don't think that we are going to see this huge drop off and a continued downward spiral for the next 5 years in the staffing industry. I do think we're going to see as interest rates are being lowered, that's going to help. And I think the economy hopefully will see a resurgence. But regardless of all that, I live in the world of I can't control that. So what can I do? Well, I can look at what's happening right now. I can stay in touch with my clients. And I think that staying in touch with them, going, okay, where are you actually hurting? What can we do to make it different? You go, well, that's not all that innovative. Yeah, but not everyone's doing it. And if you are doing it, then you'll be ahead of the game. And then taking whatever feedback you get and actually being willing to do something with it. I know some people that are chronic, I call them advice getters. They ask everyone in the world for what they should do, and then they don't do anything with it. Don't be that person as a staffing company. When you sit down with your clients, go, okay, where are the challenges? Where are the obstacles to getting the people? What are you seeing in your industry? I have conversations with my clients that have nothing to do with staffing. Like, where are the challenges in your industry? Because that is so telling about the economy overall. So I think regardless of what takes place in the economy, regardless of what takes place in the election, and a lot of other things that I don't control, What I want to do is I want to provide the best training to my people. In 2025, that's a big focus for us. Is we're investing some more systematic training that we'd like to have for our team. I want to develop my people as best as I can, and I want to look at, okay, what are my clients? Where are the biggest struggles? And what can we do to solve them? You go, that's so simple. Yeah, but that's literally it. Whatever disruptions or opportunities may arise, they're all going to come back to the fact that you know what your clients need because you are a good listener. And who knows? I mean, terrible wars could break out wherever else and affect all kinds of things. But again, we don't control all that. So what do we control? I control how well I train my people. I control how well I invest in my people. I control how communicative I am with my clients, how much time I spend with them, even when they're not giving me what I want. Let's just face it. It's easy for companies to go, I'm not getting the order, so I'm just going somewhere else. You can't do that. So I think, going back to something that's already been mentioned, staying present and asking the questions, listening, and then doing something with it, and changing processes internally to match what your clients' expectations are going forward. Because what they are going forward may not be what they were 6 months ago, let alone 5 years ago.
I love that. That is such good insight. Adrian, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy day to be with me on the podcast today. Thank you so much.
It was awesome. It was a pleasure and honor. Appreciate it, Kortney. Look forward to doing it again sometime in the future.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, there you have it. What an insightful conversation with Adrian, from innovative approach to niche markets, thoughts on the future of our industry. Honestly, Adrian, you've given us a lot to think about. So remember, whether you're dealing with market disruptions, differentiating your firm, a marketing strategy, how to build stronger relationships, whether it's your clients or your candidates, I think moral of the story is be present, be there, and think about how you're solving that for the future, not how it was done 5 years ago, because we're not in the same market. So until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible for staffing and recruiting. Kortney Harmon signing off, The Full Desk Experience. Thanks, guys.